Hola, buenos días comunidad, un gusto de saludarle, le habla Óscar Avendaño de Exploring Solutions Canada. Estaba mirando justamente ahorita el celular para determinar, a ver si ya estamos transmitiendo en vivo, sí, justamente ya estamos en vivo, para contarles algo sobre el tema muy interesante desde mayo de este año, mayo 6. Ahí estaban apareciendo los trabajadores esenciales, temporales y graduados internacionales van a tener una chance increíble para poder ser residentes con mayor facilidad. Quiero compartirles la declaración del ministro de Inmigración, algunos otros detalles también. Y bueno, si necesitan asesoría por el tema de los seguros de salud, por el tema de asesoría legal, tenemos en nuestro network varios especialistas en esa área. Así que ya saben, ahí está la información. Acá, por este otro lado, ahí está, el teléfono 905-920-2143, Exploring Solutions, ¿ok? Aquí los dejo entonces con más información acerca del tema de migración a Canadá para trabajadores esenciales y visas temporales. O sea, muy interesante. Ya volvemos.
To the Winnipeg School Board, among a wide array of other roles. She said, I come from a country that doesn't have freedom of speech or freedom of assembly. I didn't know what those freedoms meant. I think for me, coming to Canada really gave me a new life. When the pandemic struck, Jennifer acted. She founded the From Our Kitchens to Our Heroes initiative, helping Winnipeg's immigrant owned restaurants donate meals to healthcare workers across the city. She led sessions bringing together immigrants, Indigenous people, and others to make masks for low income folks. She spearheaded campaigns to tackle the alarming rise of anti Asian racism, and she even created a walking program to help newcomers socialize safely while getting exercise. In this pandemic, I really see people's hearts. Everyone is wanting to help others. And that really inspired me to continue to do what I'm doing, she said. Jennifer is simply extraordinary. And as Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, my goal is to welcome more Jennifers just like her. A little under 1 month ago, we took a big step towards accomplishing that vision. As we fight the pandemic and look towards economic recovery, we must do more for those who've done so much. That's why, on April 14th, I announced the creation of a pathway to permanent residence for up to 90,000 essential workers and recent international student graduates. The size, the speed, and the scope of this initiative is unprecedented. Le 14 avril, j'étais fier d'annoncer la création d'une voie vers la résidence permanente pour jusqu'aux 90 000 travailleurs essentiels et diplômés internationaux. Cette initiative aidera les travailleurs avec un statut temporaire dans le domaine des soins de santé et d'autres professions essentielles, ainsi qu'aux anciens étudiants étrangers. This new pathway includes 20,000 spaces for temporary workers in healthcare. Of course, this includes doctors and nurses, but also support staff in long-term care homes, custodians, and other vital workers who keep Canadians healthy and safe. It also includes 30,000 spaces for temporary workers in other essential jobs. This encompasses over 100 essential occupations, from bricklayers to bus drivers. And finally, it includes 40,000 spaces for recent international graduates. And as I've said before, international students are ideal candidates for permanent residency, and we don't just want them to study here, we want them to stay here. The pandemic is something of a perfect storm, and we've all felt it. With travel restricted we're making the most of the talent that is within our borders. And with newcomers planning to do so much and already doing so much, their contributions can no longer be overlooked. These aspiring Canadians have rolled up their sleeves. They're already hard at work in some of the most important sectors of our economy. By recognizing it, we're helping them make even greater contributions. They have what they need to thrive, and we want them to stay. When they put down their roots, we all build a stronger Canada. As I said then, this isn't just about giving people a new piece of paper. We're creating a pathway for newcomers that will boost their job security, increase their wages, from cashiers to cabinet markers. And we're creating a pathway to prosperity for all Canadians. Nous savons que l'immigration est essentielle à la vitalité de nos communautés francophones et que la pérennité de la langue française au pays passe entre autres par l'augmentation de l'immigration francophone. C'est pourquoi ces politiques comprennent des espaces dédiés aux candidats francophones ou bilingues. And now we're almost ready to open the program for applications. Tomorrow, on May 6th, candidates from across Canada will have the chance to begin applying. We're also accelerating processing of applications in the system, from family reunification to new permanent residence. Au cours de l'année écoulée, nous avons appris à apprécier à sa juste valeur ce mot essentiel. Les travailleurs essentiels ont sauvé des vies dans nos communautés et ont aidé à assurer que les familles canadiennes continuaient d'avoir le nécessaire. A glaring truth that's hit home, I think, for many Canadians is that the jobs that we have perhaps traditionally called low-skilled are actually essential. From caring for our seniors to putting food on our tables, people have awoken to the reality that these supposedly low-skilled jobs are actually anything but. From taking care of our seniors to putting food on our tables, these roles are vital, and in the time of the pandemic, they are often life-saving. Nos travailleurs de première ligne, qu'ils travaillent dans nos hôpitaux, qu'ils prennent soin de nos personnes âgées ou qu'ils contribuent à mettre de la nourriture sur nos tables, sont nos gardiens et nos sauveurs. With this new program, we do more than express our gratitude. We demonstrate it. And equally important, we spur a broader shift in how our country sees these jobs and the people who do them. I hope that a generation from now, Canadians will look back on this moment as a time when we began to better recognize the value of their work and an immigration policy that reflected it. Bien que beaucoup de choses aient changé au cours de la dernière année, une réalité demeure. L'immigration reste essentielle pour l'avenir du Canada. Much has changed over the past year, but more than ever, immigration is vital to Canada's short-term recovery and long-term prosperity. What began as temporary changes to keep our economy have blossomed into a wider shift in how we see and treat immigration in Canada. This program is a watershed moment. I look forward to seeing the difference that it makes for many years to come. We're keeping our ship on course to help Canada achieve its full potential. And our country can only reach its full potential if everyone here reaches theirs. Thank you. Merci. And now I look forward to discussing this program and its imminent launch tomorrow with our esteemed guests who I believe we have with us here, and I've already introduced them. We have Rose and Dr. Lee. Are you? Hello, Rose.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Lee.
Hi there.
Well, let me begin by thanking you both for participating in this panel discussion and also for the incredible work that you are doing on the front lines. There's no amount of gratitude that we can express to you and to all of your peers and the many people that support the healthcare system for the ways in which you are helping Canadians overcome this pandemic. I can imagine, like many, we're looking forward to that moment in the future when this pandemic will be in the rearview mirror. I am certainly, I think, encouraged by the progress that we've made, particularly around the rapidity with which we're seeing more vaccines come. And obviously, the sooner we can get folks vaccinated, the better. I'm sure those are sentiments that you would express. But we're going to focus a little bit more on the initiative that I recently launched, and that is offering a pathway to essential workers, many of whom are, helping you in the healthcare sector, and by extension, helping Canadians. And so I'm going to start with a question to Rose. I'm wondering, Rose, if you could tell us a little bit about your story and your experience in immigrating to Canada, and how that has helped you to become more woven into to your work, and how you see that work playing right now within the context of this pandemic. To you, Rose.
Thank you, Minister. Hello, everybody. Dr. Lee. So I'll try to keep it short. So I immigrated to Canada in 1999 under the Live-in Caregiver Program. I was a nurse in the Philippines at the time. And when I moved here, I was convinced that I would only stay for a year and then go back home. So I landed in Edmonton, and after a year, eventually found myself in Iqaluit, Nunavut. So I was a caregiver there as well for a year before challenging the nursing board exams and receiving my license in 2002. So that's the quick story there. While I was up north, my advantage was I had an employer who introduced me to the community, not just of Iqaluit, but also to the Filipinos that were there. As you may know, we're all over the place. We are in every single healthcare facility. I think you would be hard pressed to find a hospital or a hospice center or long-term care center that doesn't have a single Filipino, whether a nurse, a porter, housekeeping, somebody in the kitchen. So even up north, I found that a lot of us were focused more in terms of caring for either children or being in the healthcare system. I think it's a cultural thing. Plus, our country is also well known for having a high population of nurses immigrating outward to train. My experience up north, I was there from the year 2000, and I just relocated actually to Edmonton March of last year. January of last year, and ended up starting my work with AHS 2 weeks before the pandemic started. So it was a bit of a learning curve, but my role the last 7 years in Nunavut was to be a case manager, where we help liaise and collaborate with hospitals in Ottawa and the hospitals and home care and healthcare facilities up north. We don't have a very big population, and we're very spread out. And our resources up north are very, very scarce. But our role as case managers was to link the healthcare professionals in Ottawa, or sometimes in Toronto, with the doctors and the nurses in the healthcare centers, so that there would be some continuity of care. My role here in Edmonton is similar. It's actually identical, except now I was given the chance to be the program manager for the Northern Health Services Network, whose role is to coordinate care with territorial patients, not just from Nunavut, but also the NWT and the Yukon, when it comes to their care here in the Edmonton zone. So all of this stems from a very good orientation, or a very good integration into the Northern community. The North in itself, for Canadian-born citizens, is something people very rarely encounter. People still think that it's such a vast, all-white, very isolated area, and it's true. We don't have trees in Iqaluit, but very few Canadians actually get to go and experience the North. And very few understand that there is such a discrepancy in terms of the care that is given up north and that is accessible. And I think part of being an immigrant was realizing that moving to Canada, my culture, um, I don't seek to impose my culture on to the Canadian system. I seek to learn and to adapt myself. But there were two cultures I was adapting to. I was adapting not just to the Canadian culture, but also to the Indigenous and the Inuit culture up north. So my experience is not typical of an immigrant coming into the big city like Vancouver or Winnipeg, which has the largest Filipino community. But uh, but I do keep in touch with people who are immigrating to Canada. I have lots of classmates from nursing school who are currently in Calgary, BC, the East Coast, and they are not in the healthcare system immediately because there are a few barriers when it comes to coming into the country as a worker. From my generation, it was because nursing was not part of the initial um, job that was identified as essential. This was, of course, 20 years ago. But with the program the way it sits now, I believe there is the coding for nursing is there. So I'm hoping that that will help expedite, and this program will help expedite that as well, because much as we get the permanent residency status, nurses and other healthcare professionals, doctors, still have to undergo the training in order to qualify for these roles. And sometimes these qualifications require 2 years of training, a bridging program. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is currently an assistant at a doctor's office. She's an OBGYN in the Philippines. And right now that the testing is closed, I think, but she'll start from residency. It's just it's the and interprovincially it is different, but hopefully once they get permanent residency status, this will be a way for them to actually finalize their plans. Because if you're working under a worker visa, you don't know if this can be extended. You don't know if you can actually settle down and put down roots, as you mentioned, Minister. And this will enable those who are already here to actually have a little bit more stability in their planning.
Well, that is such a, I think, an insightful answer. And there were a few themes that as I was listening to you offer your insights that really stuck out for me. One is obviously the very large and growing diaspora of Filipino Canadians who are here in Canada, roughly a million, and I represent a constituency that has a large Filipino community, and I agree with you. There's a real, I think, sense of giving back to community and looking after one another that I see, and it's nice to hear you talk about your own personal journey, perhaps a little less conventional, starting in the north, but then coming back to Edmonton and the other thing two other things that I think really stuck out for me were how your own I think your own culture and heritage you've been able to weave into the Canadian social fabric in the north and in Edmonton. And then finally, it has been really encouraging to hear how your career horizon has continued to expand and how you're now taking up a sort of a supervisory and a managerial role within the healthcare sector. And tying that into, I think this announcement is about providing that pathway for others who wish to put down roots, who wish to have that certainty, and certainly that is there were a chorus of voices during the course of the creation of this program with whom we consulted that expressed very similar sentiments. So thank you so much, Rose, for offering that. And maybe now I'll turn to Dr. Lee, who is in British Columbia. And I'm wondering if perhaps maybe you might just expand a little bit on what Rose was getting at in terms of the contributions of newcomers, particularly those who are working in the healthcare sector during the pandemic. Over to you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your kind invitation. And thank you, Rose, for your story and how compelling it is in terms of the importance of this program. I will give a little bit of context. I'm the CEO for Fraser Health. It's a health authority that serves 1.8 million people, 1 in 20 Canadians. We actually have about 90% of refugee population and 40% of the newcomer population in British Columbia that settle in our region. So our region, in terms of the health region, is one of the most diverse areas in Canada. And what we found throughout the pandemic, unfortunately, is that the pandemic has not had an equal impact on all. It's had more of a disproportionate impact on those that might be more vulnerable and those that are in specific settings. So a lot of racialized communities are in our region as well. And as you spoke about, Minister, people that are essential workers, we're living in dense situations in multi-generational homes. We've had disproportionate COVID impacts in those areas. And I think one of the things that we learned throughout the pandemic is that we are all connected in this. And when we look at people that have been disproportionately impacted, it has been in the manufacturing areas, it's been in the food processing areas, it's been in grocery stores, it's been in those areas that we do have more people that are newcomers that are in those workforces as well. So I think some of the things that you talk about in terms of the avenue, this pathway, it also gives that assurance for people that are providing essential services to our region. And I'm connecting that as an important health service as well, because our health and wellness depend on not just healthcare, but also the kinds of food that we have access to, kinds of activities that we have access to, and many of the people that we have in our region that are newcomers work in those very important sectors. So when I look at the health sector in itself, I think 15 months ago, when the pandemic was declared and globally initially seen, we saw some of the devastating impacts of the pandemic in the health sector. And I think when you look, it might not be as apparent for people that are outside of the health system, but our health system in Fraser is very much reflective of the diversity in our region. And when the health system is stretched, it's not because we don't have enough space. It's not because we don't have enough beds, enough critical care beds. It's because we don't have enough people that can serve in that role, whether it's nurses, whether it's people that are cleaning, whether it's critical care physicians, whether it's surgeons. So the people that are actually caring for our patients are the most critical factor in providing our health system. I think throughout the pandemic, we've come up with some very creative solutions to ensure that our healthcare workforce is maximized and leveraged, but they have been stretched. And I think wherever possible, we can recruit and train faster. And one of those avenues is exactly, I think, Rose's friend that she talked about. There are many healthcare workers from outside of Canada that's living and working in an underemployed situation because their valid healthcare credentials are not acknowledged in our setting. So whatever we can do to accelerate that, whatever we can do to help support healthcare workers from newcomer population that can actually participate in our current workforce in our healthcare system throughout the world, actually, not only in Canada, but healthcare workforce crisis is going to come, whether it's this year because of the pandemic. It's been projected at least 10 years out, but unfortunately it hit already. And I think this program that you've spoken about is an important avenue to actually increase our support for healthcare workforce and to actually support people that are currently working in our health system to ensure that we have as many people that can provide the necessary care that we need.
I appreciate you saying that, Dr. Lee, and it's worth sort of just reminding to everyone who is listening or watching that roughly 1 in 3 workers in the healthcare sector is an immigrant. And just imagine for a moment, how much further our system and our front lines would be strained without those newcomers who are stepping up and rolling up their sleeves and contributing. And that's one of the reasons why this pathway is so important. And I think the other point that you made that I am very alive to is that status does help with accreditation, and it does help people become, fully that their talents and their skills become fully realized, that their potential is fully integrated into our economy. So, there is every reason to believe that this pathway, which again is extremely, significant in its size, its scope, and as well as in our ambition to see it realized quickly, will help to accelerate that process of integration. And maybe just as we round out this discussion, I could just ask you both for a sort of quick final perspective on, why, in your view, it's important that we continue with this work, that we continue to recognize the contributions of newcomers, obviously within our healthcare sector, as we fight the pandemic, but more broadly in some of the other supporting occupations that maybe have not found it traditionally as easy to get status in Canada. And, perhaps I'll start with you, Rose, and then we'll go back to Dr. Lee.
Thank you again. The world is getting so much smaller in terms of people getting together. Social media is weaving everybody's lives together. And the pandemic has shown us that we're even smaller and more interconnected than we ever have been. It's no longer a world where each individual person comes into a country and they stay in their own little nooks and crannies where, for example, there is a Filipino community, there is a Caribbean community, there is an East Indian community. Everybody now is literally a global melting pot. And I believe that immigration is a way to not just strengthen the workforce, but it also is a way to strengthen the country in general, because everybody coming in has the collective knowledge from all the other countries that they come in from. And they have a rich culture and knowledge that they can contribute to make the country stronger, not just in the workforce, but just in terms of knowledge and culture. It becomes so important for everybody to realize that the world is, in fact, not just outside of the borders, but also within the country. In terms of the current situation, not to focus on COVID or anything, but the virus doesn't pick and choose which nationality or which culture they will jump from person to person to person. Everybody is connected. Literally, it's very important for us to all just keep connected, make everybody feel welcome, because it is only in this manner that everybody will feel that they truly can contribute more to the country that they're going into, as opposed to feeling that they are just a small portion that doesn't have any value in that system. Acknowledging that they are important and acknowledging that they have something to share and something to contribute does have a big impact in terms of what they share to the workforce, whether it be in healthcare or in manufacturing.
Thank you so much, Rose. And maybe just a few final words to Dr. Lee before we close up this discussion.
Thank you for that. For me, my family, myself, were newcomers more than 3 decades ago. And for me, Canada, and I guess the program, actually I think the Pathway program reflects what Canada stands for to me, which to me is that we're about giving equitable chance for success for everyone. And I think this program will enable and accelerate that to occur for people that can fully contribute to our society.
A very positive punctuation mark on an important conversation, and I just want to really thank you again very much for taking time out of your busy days. I know, Rose, you have to go and pick up some kids. I said to you earlier before we began the conversation that I completely relate, but honestly, thank you for your work. Thank you for your insights today in this important conversation, and continued good health. We'll see you again soon. Thank you
Thank you,
to our,
Minister.
your guest panelists. And I think now we'll go back to Alex to moderate some questions from the media. Merci.
Thank you, Minister. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. And thank you so much to our two guests for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedule to illuminate this important discussion. Merci beaucoup au Dr. Lee et à Rose pour votre contribution importante. Maintenant, on passera aux périodes de questions. We will now turn to media questions. So I believe we have a few queued up on the line. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. We will now take questions from the telephone lines. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions. We will only be taking questions from media. Nous prendrons seulement les questions des médias. If you have a question, please press *1 on your device's keypad. Si vous désirez poser une question, veuillez s'il vous plaît appuyer sur les touches étoile 1 de votre appareil. There will be a brief pause while participants register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. Thank you for your patience. Merci de patienter. Our first question, la première question. Stephanie Levitz, the Toronto Star. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions, and good to see you, though you can't see me. I want to ask you a question about the subject of vaccines, because I'd like to hear your thoughts on the idea of the vaccine passport and what role you think getting one in place plays in resuming immigration to Canada.
Well, first of all, good to hear your voice, Steph. And I would say two things. First, it's really important that Canada continues its work domestically to accelerate vaccinations. And I think Canadians can and should be encouraged by the rapidity with which we are ramping up that progress. I believe it's 8 or 9 million vaccines delivered this month in May, with approximately 50 million expected total delivered by the end of June. So that work has to continue in earnest. And I think that the second component in answer to your question is that Canada needs to be at the international tables, both at the WHO and ICAO, where there are discussions around setting a universal standard for vaccinations to promote the safe travel of those who have been vaccinated. And this is work that is ongoing. My department's playing a role in that, but we're also doing it in conjunction with Health Canada. So certainly we're envisioning a post-vaccinated world, and in the grand scheme, it is a positive thought, but there's still a lot of work to be done yet.
And I think if I got a follow-up, just to continue with that, I mean, a number of the largest source countries for Canada for newcomers are places in the developing world where vaccine access is not rolling out as quickly there as it is, say, in the developed world. So I wonder then about that part of the puzzle. And are we going to see a necessary lag because the folks who are coming in don't have that vaccine, don't have that piece of paper? And as part of your discussion in the department about, is there a point at which we can offer it to incoming permanent residents, temporary foreign workers, and so on?
Yeah, you raise a good point, and I would say, obviously we're continuing to work towards a world in which there will be a system in place to recognize passports, and as I said, we are certainly advancing that work both domestically as well as abroad. But in the meantime, I would just underline that, particularly as it relates to having safe corridors of travel for workers who are keeping our economy going, including in the healthcare sector, as well as the agricultural sector, to assure that we continue to maintain food security, that is done in concert with having in place the rigorous health protocols, whether it's through pre-arrival testing, as well as the quarantining period, as well as looking at programs once those workers arrive in Canada, including in some of the more vulnerable populations like migrant workers, at ways to vaccinate them as well. And we we obviously look to guidance from our healthcare experts and the best way to sequence that work. But we take that advice, we integrate it into our overall approach, because we fundamentally believe that workers who do come and ply their trade so that Canadians can get access to healthcare, vaccines, and food are also able to ply their trade in an environment that is healthy and safe.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
I'll go to the next question. Question, operateur.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, la prochaine question, Shelby Devenant, CIC News. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hello, Minister. Nice speaking to you again. Hello. Can you hear me?
No, I hear you fine. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay, no problem. All right. So normally, application guides are published well in advance so people can prepare their documents. These guides only came out today. Furthermore, many people weren't able to get their language tests in time for the launch tomorrow. There's also no portal for representatives to file on behalf of clients. So some essential workers will have to take time off work in order to apply. There's also people on paid leave, such as maternity, who are not eligible for these programs, and yet theoretically they would be able to fill out the application on their own and not miss work. So given all these factors, why not delay the launch of the programs and work out some of these kinks?
Well, the first thing I want to do is just return to the inclusivity of this program, and just by its sheer size, having 90,000 spaces allocated for essential workers and recent graduates, as well as the diversity of occupations that those aspiring new Canadians will represent. This is really an unprecedented program, and I begin with that positive statement because it was not a foregone conclusion that in the midst of this pandemic that we would make this choice, but we did, and we did it largely on the basis of feedback that we received from economists as well as many advocates from the immigrant and migrant workers community. So that's the place to begin with. I also acknowledge that because it's a new program, that we have a lot of legwork to do to make sure that it is communicated clearly and that there will be access to the program. And just by way of an update, that the guidelines are posted on our website. So there is a step-by-step process that lays out what are the documents that you need, how can you complete the application, and our department stands at the ready to assist those who will be making their way through the applications process, and that's something that we have become very adept at providing support for. On the language and representative components, I'll just say on language that first and foremost, we are very alive to this issue. And it is our best information that our partners in the testing sector are adding more sessions so that as many aspiring applicants will be able to get tested. The other thing I would say is that we accept testing results that are up to 2 years old. So there will be many who will apply under this program who already have their test results, which means that they can hit the application process running. And look, on the representative front, as a former lawyer, I completely understand and appreciate the perspective of the need to make sure that that there are services and support in place for those to make their way through this applications process. We are going to be having a box on that application process so that newcomers will be able to ensure that they get the support they need.
Okay, thank you. And for my follow-up question, in 2019, the Parents and Grandparents Program also operated on a first-come, first-served model. About 100,000 people were interested in 20,000 spots, and they filled up in 10 minutes. 70 people filed lawsuits, which IRCC settled by providing them permanent residency. For these streams, we have maybe 1.5 million work and study permit holders in the country, potentially 500,000 of them vying for these 90,000 spots. So my question is, why use a first-come, first-served model for programs with intake caps again when it has not worked in the past?
Well, I think we've learned many lessons over the course of the last couple of years, including drawing some, important lessons from the parent and grandparent program. And I will say that every single initiative that we launch, whether it's online or in hard copy form, we endeavor to make sure that that process is accessible, that it's transparent in the way of guidance, and that it's fair. And certainly through those values we have applied to this program as well. We are, I think, encouraged by the early indications that this will be a program that is high in demand. It is not necessarily a surprise to me, just given what we have seen in the way of contributions of those who are already here in Canada. And it is because of those contributions that we created this program. And I would say that I am always open to receiving more input from our partners in the immigration sector about how we can continue to improve these programs. I will say that when we launched this program, that there were many voices within ACORUS who said that this was a really strong and positive step in the right direction, because it embraced, I think, many of the positions and arguments that have been made by economists, that we have an accessible pool of talent and skills, and not just focused on one sector, but by looking at newcomers who possess a wide range of skills in those parts of the economy where we need it the most. And that is certainly what the objective and the vision of this program is to create yet another new and unprecedented pathway, unprecedented in its size, speed, and its scope. And I think that we will accomplish that vision with a lot of hard work, but I'm looking forward to doing it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelby. Merci, Shelby. Passera maintenant prochaine question, operateur.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, Ross McLaughlin, CTV Vancouver. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for speaking with us. This is kind of timely because I've been talking to some folks who are already here and in the queue who are valuable to the healthcare industry. One fellow in particular in Vancouver who's helped develop a possible cancer cure with toxic mushrooms. So your timing is interesting because we're getting complaints from people about the delays in processing those already in the queue. So can you outline some of the steps that have been taken to address the backlog, the issues during the pandemic, the slowdown of processing applications, et cetera?
Well, first thing I would say is, of course, the pandemic, without question, caused disruption, I think, not only to my department, but right across government and in any aspect of life. But I would say to those aspiring applicants in British Columbia and across the country, keep the faith. This is good news. This is a new program. This will increase your chances of being able to stay in Canada, including for many people who are in occupations where perhaps the pathway was not quite as easy as it was before this program was launched. But the way that we are making strides towards getting back to pre-COVID processing times is by adding people. I mean, I recently announced that we hired dozens new IRCC officers to look at and process applications. We're also leveraging the best technology that is available at our fingertips. I'll also put in a plug for Budget 2021, just recently announced by my colleague, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, who is a very large believer in immigration as being an economic driver, not only for the short term, but as well as for our long-term prosperity. And it is because of her belief that we have, I believe, sufficient investments to completely modernize and transform our immigration system. Again, we want to retain that competitive advantage, but also to facilitate faster outcomes, which is, I know, some of the feedback that you're hearing. So by doing these things all at the same time, I believe that this pathway will provide faster and better outcomes for newcomers who are already in Canada, who are helping in some of the most vital parts of our economy right now, and this is a good thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. On passera maintenant à la prochaine question. On to the next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, Ian Bailey, the Globe and Mail. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Can't hear you, Ian. Are you on mute?
Ian Bailey from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open. If you're using a speakerphone, pick up your handset and unmute your line, please. Hearing no one, we will move on to the next questioner. Our next question, Man Amahidi from the Canadian Press. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hello, Mr. Mendicino. Thanks for taking our questions. The Migrant Workers Alliance. Yeah, thank you. So the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change is saying that 5 migrant farm workers have died in quarantine this year in Canada. They're calling on the government for investigation, and they're calling for compensation for the families, to the families of these farm workers. Are you aware of this situation? Is the department investigating this?
Well, thank you for the question. And, as I have said on a number of occasions, we are so grateful for the contributions of the migrant worker community. And we know that in a number of cases that those workers have paid the ultimate sacrifice, having passed away from COVID. And it just really underscores how important it is that we continue to support migrant workers and all newcomers who are members of a vulnerable population that are here to work and to provide Canadians with access to safe and affordable food and other essential goods, which is why the government has invested over $100 million to further protect migrant workers. That's work that we do in conjunction not only with their employers, but with the provincial governments who have primary responsibility for work and health and safety standards. And we will continue to do this work. We know that when they come, that there is a need to be alive to the fact that they need PPE and testing and tracing, and as I mentioned in my earlier answer, to think forward towards a vaccination strategy. So we will take the best advice from our healthcare experts on that. But yes, of course, we're very alive to that. And I will just say, to round out my answer, that was also one of the motivations for this announcement, which was to provide a greater and more expanded opportunity for temporary workers in Canada, already here, working in essential parts of our economy, to provide them with permanent status. And that by doing so, that we would provide them with certainty and the ability to stay in Canada should they wish to do so.
Thanks, Mr. But there are specifically there are 5 who have died. Now, the Alliance is saying that the quarantine conditions are not safe or dignified. Is this a concern? Does this concern you? I mean, there shouldn't be an investigation, specific investigation into this specifically now.
Of course, it concerns me. It concerns me profoundly. It concerns me, and I believe our government, whenever someone passes away from the pandemic, and our entire energy is focused on vaccinating as many people as quickly as possible. That has been the singular and most important priority of our government for the past year. And, as part of that work, we're also looking at ways to further protect migrant workers. And there are some very painful lessons to be learned, including from the migrant workers community. And, this is an ongoing challenge. And I'm certainly committed. I know my colleagues are committed to continuing to work with advocates for migrant workers, as well as migrant workers themselves, those who employ them, to make sure that they are safe, that they're safe from the pandemic, that they're able to apply their trade in an environment that is healthy. And that is work that we do in conjunction with provincial governments who, as I said earlier, have the primary responsibility to enforce those occupational health and safety standards. But we will continue to do this work so that every single worker, regardless of status, will be healthy and safe in Canada.
Thanks, Man. Merci, Man. Nous passons maintenant à notre dernière question. We'll now go to our final question. Operator?
Thank you. The last question, la dernière question. Ian Bailey, the Globe and Mail. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
You're back, Ian.
Apologies, Minister. I was muted when I was trying to ask.
I had a feeling.
Well, let me try again. Just very generally, migrant rights groups across the country, obviously, and you've talked a bit about this, were raising some very specific concerns yesterday about this program, calling for changes to the program instead of allowing it to proceed this week. I just wonder in general, do you have any general broad response to some of those criticisms that came from right across the country, from groups right across the country yesterday?
Well, I would reiterate that this is a program that is unprecedented, and as a result, we are committed to working with our partners right across the country, with whom we do the important work of integrating and welcoming newcomers, including those who are already here. And this program will represent a significant step, another milestone for them, as up to 90,000 will achieve status in a way that perhaps they might not have been able to beforehand. I know that many of the points that have been raised by not only the Migrant Workers Alliance but other advocates are ones that I am very alive to. I think that we have demonstrated a capacity to listen and to learn and to innovate. And certainly that is one of the main hallmarks, whether it's in the context of the launch of this program, the launch of the Guardian Angels, which provided pathways for undocumented asylum seekers. What we have demonstrated is a real willingness to work in partnership with those who are in the sector so that we can achieve as many positive outcomes by providing status to those newcomers who are here.
As a follow-up, what latitude do you have to adjust the program once it sort of launches this week, once the train leaves the station, so to speak? What latitude do you have to change and adjust the program?
Well, I think just to begin, the train hasn't yet left the station, Ian. It's going to start leaving tomorrow, and I think before we, prematurely make or rush to make any judgments about the train being on the tracks, let's see it pick up steam. Let's see, that and ensure that it stays on track and that it makes gets to its final destination, which is to welcome 90,000 newcomers in a way that is unprecedented. And of course, along the way, there may be opportunities to stop at a station here or there. And as I have said before, I'm always prepared to listen to the feedback and the input that we get from our communities. Indeed, we listened and really did consult with a number of folks in this ecosystem before we launched. But my door will always be open, because I do think at the end of the day, we are heading to that same final destination, and we want to be sure that we get there.
Thank you, Ian. This now concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci aux membres des médias pour nous joindre aujourd'hui. Thank you to all the members of the media who joined us today. Have a good afternoon.
Buenas tardes, buenos días, donde depende del horario que ustedes nos estén escuchando. Bueno, esta ha sido la presentación del nuevo programa para trabajadores esenciales del ministro de Inmigración. Espero que haya sido de bastante utilidad todos los posteos que hemos puesto con los links para que tú apliques. Si necesitas asesoría legal, nosotros en nuestro grupo de networking, de Network, disponemos de varios profesionales que se especializan en el área de inmigración, y con mucho gusto ellos estarían disponibles para poder colaborar. Así que ya sabes, si necesitas asesoría, puedes llamar al 905-920-2143 y podrás tener la asesoría que necesitas para el tema de ya que si estás ya en Canadá, si ya estás en Canadá, y estás trabajando en algunas de las actividades esenciales y además eres estudiante internacional, ya graduado o en vías de estar graduado, todavía tienes tiempo. La aplicación se inició en mayo 6 de este año y termina la inscripción en noviembre 6 de este año. Así que es información fresca, todavía puedes hacerlo para los graduados internacionales en instituciones canadienses, dice acá el aviso abajo, ¿cierto? Bueno. De hecho, quería invitarlos a que conocieran un poquito más acerca de ese programa y bueno, siempre estamos pendientes de seguir explorando soluciones para ti en todas las áreas que tienen que ver con el asentamiento, el tema financiero y obviamente lograr obtener y recibir las mayores cantidades de beneficios posibles. Se despide Óscar Avendaño de Exploring Solutions Canada, deseándoles un excelente día, un lindo comienzo de verano, que hace muy pocos días ya se inició nuestro verano, aquí en Ontario, Canadá. Entonces, si hay más preguntas, por favor en el chat o vía email a info@exploringsolutions.ca o vía teléfono, vía WhatsApp. Eso sería todo. Que pasen una excelente semana y que Dios los bendiga. Cuídense mucho.
Les habla Óscar Avendaño de Exploring Solutions Canada. Quiero compartir con ustedes que hemos incluido un nuevo servicio para ti: financiamiento de vehículos nuevos y usados. Sí, escuchaste bien. Enfocados en ti, nuevos inmigrantes, estudiantes internacionales o cualquier residente ya establecido con o sin crédito. Toda situación migratoria será atendido. Por favor, llámanos al 905-920-2143 y comienza a conducir tu carro ahora.